Well, in this country, we measure success of college presidents. Do the SAT scores go up? Is the endowment richer than it was when you came? And using those measurements, you're a fabulous success as president for 10 years at Spelman College. What other way would you like to be judged? Looking back on your tenure, what other measurement can we apply to you? Success, failure?
Well, I would again give voice to a more active intellectual climate. Number two, I'd like to think that those cold years led to a far greater openness to difference. I mean, when I arrived at Spelman, I was rather surprised by what I would call the inhospitable climate, for example, for Muslim students, who really were being told with too many messages that they ought to consider Christianity. I was shocked by the depth of homophobia on that campus. I was surprised by the absence of questioning, of different ways of explaining the world. And so I'd like to think that in a number of ways, Spelman has a greater interest in and respect for human diversity.
Now, those are hard to quantify. You know, you can measure endowment, you can look at SAT scores. Is it possible to quantify that in some measurable way? I know you could walk around the campus.
Only by vignettes.
Yeah.
And I can only give you vignettes that Audre Lorde had been so insulted on that campus that she vowed she would never, ever, ever return. While I was at Spelman, Sister Audre not only gave me the greatest gift of returning to that campus, Julian, the majority of her papers are in the archives of Spelman College.
Yeah.
You know, Spelman, under my administration, that's a word that sounds so funny to me, but I'm supposed to use it, permitted the establishment of the lesbian and bisexual organization. You see, that is
And
measurable.
it had been previously prohibited? Not only prohibited, but frowned upon.
It did not exist. So these things, again...
And black women were not lesbians.
Oh, no, that's white women's stuff.
Yeah.
No, that's white women's stuff. Black women aren't feminist either. So these are things that are very meaningful to me. The intellectual climate is more agitated. Respect for difference became higher. And then thirdly, and this was always there, and I think I simply had the gift with others to lift it up, and that is that whole question of service, you know, which is so fundamental to being a race man and a race woman. This idea that yes, these students should do everything in their power to be successful, get money, have great jobs, but they need to think about what they're going to do to make life better for most black folk. And so making service a centerpiece of my administration was very important to me. When I left and the board asked if there was anything that I wanted, I said yes. I didn't want a building named after me. I wanted a program. And so there is at Spelman the Johnnetta B. Cole Office of Community Service and Community Building.
Back to Spelman. So high SATs, high endowment, fabulous improvements on the campus, intellectual climate heightened, improved. What didn't you do that you wish you'd done? What didn't get done?
What didn't get done in the easiest way to describe it is greater institutionalizing of those things. You know, things can change very quickly. And I think that perhaps more years would have allowed what I hoped to do to become more solid.
But so why then just 10 years? I'm guessing you could have had another 10 or another 10 or another 10 after that. Why were 10 years?
There's no question. I certainly could have had more than 10. I mean, the board, I think at the point when I went to them and said I thought it was time, I know the board was prepared for me to stay for another hunk of time. Julian, I have this dread of staying too long.
Yes.
And when I look at our institutions, our colleges and universities, and our organizations, I am really convinced that we have done great harm by staying too long. And so I've always wanted to go when people still wanted me to stay. I went to Emory. 3 years, folk were asking me why did I need to retire? Because folks still wanted me to stay. Best time to leave.
Yes, I'm just reading. It's best to leave while people still want you to stay.
It really is.
But how do you know?
Well,
How do you know when they still want you to stay? Or
there
sometimes
were-
they're saying
there were
you're
many
great, you're
signs.
wonderful, you're fabulous.
there were many signs. I mean, it was, in my view, a magical era. It was a very special presidency. And when I think about why, you know, I really have to go to an old biblical expression, the least among you. And in real terms, one can say that African American women have been put in the position of being the least among us. Black, female, and so often poor. And so to lift up a place of African American women is to do a mighty task.
Well, let me touch on something I missed when we introduced the subject. You are the first African American woman president of this African American Women's College. Not the
In
first woman.
107 years of
The first 3 presidents are white women.
first 4.
First 4. So you're guessing that the founder said women's college, woman president. But in this era, 100 plus years ago, they got to be white women. And then a period ensues. A number of people come along, but none of them is an African American woman. Why did it take the college so long?
Simplest answer, sexism and racism in the way that they combine in a black woman's presidency. I just think the prevailing notion was no one is worthy.
But you know, you think about about Bennett. And Bennett had black women presidents. Why couldn't Spelman?
Good question. And I'm sure with complexities that we can't go into now, as to who were the folk who really determined who would be Spelman's president. The forces, the families that had a great deal to say about all of that. But it is a shocking notion that it took 107 years for it to finally happen. My predecessor, Don Stewart, was so wonderfully gracious as he left Spelman and I came in. There was a period of time there when Don and I were together in Atlanta. And he just had a wonderful way of being in a setting and sticking out his hand and saying, I'm Don Stewart, the last male president Spelman College will ever have. No, in fact, he would say the last black male president Spelman College would ever have. Don, I think, really went through a tough period there because, as you know, when he was going through the process, the students, they locked up the trustees for hours and protested. And so I never forgot that my presence on that campus was directly related to the activism of black women students.